Did anyone notice? Was anyone
Oh yeah,
watching
people
that?
were in the chat. So it was great. It was fantastic.
Well, those people can pay $15 to
Yeah, it's too late.
see
Too
the
late.
rest of the show.
Do you want me to do? I'm not going to. Do you want me to link the Patreon in the chat though?
Yeah, that'd be
or-
fantastic, honestly.
That's the kind of marketing we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're viral marketing.
I'm sure
I heard Vice was looking for
six
a
people,
two-person
all of whom
show,
were
though.
dating. Yeah, I heard Vice loved it. Loved it when I did anything else with Friends at the Table. All right, there. I've deleted it from our thing.
Can you get it still?
What do you mean?
Like,
Oh, fuck. I
is
didn't think about that. We lost that bit then, huh? Yeah.
Well.
That's a shame. That's, you know, hot exclusive. The hottest exclusive.
Yeah, that's the hottest exclusive yet.
Let's see if there are people in the real chat now. Not yet, which is weird.
Okay. All right.
I have my side of all those conversations.
I have the end
God,
of
that's
I have the last
funny as
3.5
shit.
minutes.
Close all these tabs of drink.
That's
layers.
extremely funny. This image is so good. Oh. I'm going to post this image into our real chat, into our chat.
Mm-hmm.
Post this over here. This is classic. This is good. Good chat here. Shout outs to AJ. It's good. Extremely good. Extremely good. But no, I think it should be gone now from Twitch. Let me just double check before I get a fucking call.
There were 130 people watching that?
Yeah, dog, we went live.
I guess I don't know what it's like to be part of a big media conglomerate.
130 people is not any people, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We
We
get
have 12 right now.
Yeah, it's because it's for $15 patrons. When we do our live shows, we get like that. Wait, it's still
we
there. Hold
somehow
up,
go
one
steal
second.
the giant bomb
No, it's
stream
gone
now.
now. 6 people, all of
I
us.
mean, I can't, but
I'll call Jeff and see what's good. I'll be, yo, Jeff.
Sure, he'd love it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How do I...
What's up?
I think it's gone. I think it's good. It started playing again one time. I had it playing. I had it, like, it's still listed under all videos. But, okay, there. It's gone now. It's gone now for real. Boom.
Adieu to the Art Nelson show.
Katie, I of course value the 12 of you more than I value, I'm going to say, the whole Waypoint audience.
That includes a lot of...
There's some crossover, but still.
There's a lot of crossover.
Well, the 12, if those 12 cross over, I still like them.
It took a year, but it finally happened.
The anniversary special was that little stream.
Yep, finally. God, all right. Should we do a show?
Do we need to clap?
We do.
Yes, we do actually.
We super do. Just think, oh God, I should have just had time.is up. That's what I should have had. That would have been better. All right. Ready?
55?
Yeah, sounds good.
That's so long from now.
I was a second early. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're gonna do 5 seconds. 5 after. I was just like a split second late. I think it's fine.
Okay.
I closed the wrong thing. Fuck. Alright, here we go. And then let's go to gaming. There we go. There we go. There we go.
Doesn't everyone feel like qualified to give advice tonight?
Always.
Man.
Are you kidding me?
I'm seeing if... Okay, I'm just making sure. Shocking. Only one person DM'd me on Twitter to be like, yo.
Oh.
I was certain that my whole Twitter feed would just be... I guess we got to it pretty quick. All right. Are we ready to roll on this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welcome to Tips at the Table, an RPG podcast focused on critical questions, hopefully smart answers, and fun interactions between good friends. I am your host, Austin Walker. Follow me on Twitter at Austin_Walker. And, a thing I don't ever say here is sometimes I stream over at twitch.tv/waypoint. And maybe you were one of the, how many was it, Art?
130?
130 people who saw me streaming over there a moment ago. Whoops. Instead, we're streaming this today over on our YouTube channel and doing a recording. As always, thank you to our patrons who let us do this. And if you want to support us or already are and want to change and maybe say, like, hey, maybe if I give Austin another $1 a month, his brain will be good then. And he'll remember not to stream to the wrong channel. You can go to friendsathetable.cash to do that. Joining me today, Ali Akampora.
Yep, that's me. You can find me at _West on Twitter.com.
Andy Clare.
Hey, I'm Andy. You can find me on Twitter at Captain Trash, and you can find my other show at Emoji Drum.
Art Martinez Tebble.
Hey, hi, you follow me on Twitter at Atebble. You've already missed being named as one of the 12 Waypoint fans that I like, so it's too late for that, but you could still be one of my top one song only podcast listeners that you can follow on Twitter at OneSongPod.
And then I don't know if you noticed this, but my cadence was, I was going to be like, and Austin Walker, but then I noticed that one was me. So, given all the good lead-in we've got, we should just jump right into these questions. Does that sound good to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this one comes in from Mary, who says, hello, friends and table. I recently started playing a tabletop game with some longtime friends. The character I've chosen is a pop star who just woke up from cryo sleep after 100 years. I've chosen to play this character with no interest in combat, at least for the moment, since the last time she remembers was peaceful. The issue is that the system we're playing, Starfinder, is pretty combat-focused, and while the GM is encouraging me to explore my character's aversion to combat, some of the other players were upset with my decision to not grab a weapon when we started, and it worries me that I'll be making the game unfun for them. Should I go ahead and play into the system by giving my character a weapon, or should I let myself explore my character's feelings, even if it puts her and potentially others in danger? Thanks for everything y'all do, Mary. So I guess my immediate thought here is that this is one of those reasons why I advocate so often for open conversation about goals and tone and what a campaign is, because it feels like there might be some disconnect between what the rest of the players at the table want and what you want, and I don't mean the combat thing. It sounds like you're super interested in exploring your character first and foremost, and that's rad. Obviously, like, we're big fans of that here. But there might be players at the table who are more interested in, like, interesting combat challenges and, like, getting cool fighting powers. And Starfinder is certainly, from my reading of it, I haven't ever actually played it, but I read the book, a little bit more in that direction. And so I think the thing to say here for me anyway is it's not too late to have that conversation and say, hey, the thing I'm really interested in here is doing this type of thing. And I hope that y'all understand that, and I don't want to get in the way necessarily. But like, that's really what draws me to the table. And to just have an honest conversation about like where you're going. It sounds like your GM is really supportive of this. And my hope is that, and again, this is something you can talk to them about, is that they should be providing you opportunities to do the sorts of stuff you're interested in the same way that they're providing opportunities for the rest of the players. And that does mean sometimes there will be moments when your character is not super useful in a fight, and that's not a bad thing. What's important is to make those sequences really interesting and really compelling on their own, because being the person who doesn't have a weapon in a fight is like a cool, interesting thing to deal with. And it should be the case that, like, you dig into, like, hey, my character is the one who doesn't want to fucking shoot people. Like, what's that look like? And I think that's actually a really potent idea for a character, even in a game that doesn't necessarily give you that is very combat heavy. Any thoughts from anybody else here?
Yeah, I would like to call someone out on this.
Okay.
Which is the unnamed GM here.
Yeah.
Because if the GM is encouraging this character's aversion to combat, and some of the players are upset that there's no weapon grabbing here, then there's a disconnect.
Yes.
And it's the GM's fault.
Yeah.
Because if the combat is so hard that it is unfun, missing a set of combat rolls, then your GM isn't really encouraging you as much as they are like making you a secondary antagonist. You know, you should do what you want to do and what is fun for you and all of that, but you also shouldn't be making the game unfun for everyone else playing with you because they're dying now.
Right.
You know.
Right. Which because your GM was like, yeah, cool, let's do that. They should then react to that in a way that isn't just like, well, then if the party dies, that's on you, Mary. And that's not it. That's not really the thing that encouragement looks like. There is, mechanical encouragement too, Allie, Andy, thoughts here?
I was gonna say if you want to if you talk to your group and they still want to do combat, but you also still want to be part of it, there are other ways to engage in those sequences without directly committing violence.
Yeah.
And I don't know I don't know Starfinder, so I don't know what options you have mechanically there. But definitely look over and see what other options you have, because that can lead to really interesting stuff too when you're engaging in stuff that in a way that everyone else is doing one way and then you just throw something else at them. Like when you have pocket sand that's choke dust instead of hitting someone with a wrench.
Yeah.
That was my whole thing with Aubrey, was just trying to find different ways to engage in that without doing something that could be considered direct combat.
Right.
And it's tricky, but if you can find a way to do that that's fun, I think it's really rewarding to do in a tabletop game.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that makes it a little tough is that Starfinder... So Starfinder is by Paizo, the company that makes Pathfinder, and it is sci-fi, science fantasy Pathfinder. It came out last year. It's neat. It has some neat things, but it's still a game that has attacks of opportunity and critical hits and, take one swift action or take two, whatever actions. That's very much the thing. It is as a game built towards combat. That's not to say there aren't cool other things, aren't cool other abilities and stuff, but, I don't know necessarily what class or whatever Mary's playing here, but my hope is that it's a class that has cool stuff to do that isn't just I hit them hard or I cast a spell that hurts them, but it can be tough. It can be tough. Allie, so one of the things I like is Andy, you already said, obviously Aubrey was someone who avoided combat, but then Allie, Aria, also a pop star, but also someone who specifically never wanted to kill anybody, right? Or not maybe never, but started that game with I'm not out to kill people.
Yeah. That's why, this question is a little bit of a bummer, because it just, I feel bad that, not these people, but your friends aren't encouraging you, or, at least, aren't being nice about it. Especially since, the way that it's stated here, at least, is, this is how she feels right now, and maybe my character is going to feel differently later.
Right.
There are definitely support roles that you can take and cooler combat things that you can do that are not I have a gun and I shoot it, and also I like to sing. There are other variances there. So I think it's, you should probably just talk it out with everybody.
Yeah. And there's go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, well, I just meant to just get on the same page in terms of I don't think that she wants to fight this way, but I could do XYZ or whatever else, just so people can kind of feel like they have the pathways of having a good time.
Totally. And I do think that if you look at the book and look at the game and think about if you come around and you're oh, hey, actually I think maybe I do want to be part of combat, and you can do that for a lot of reasons, ranging from you just decide it's cool to your GM is not giving you great opportunities for interaction outside of combat, and that's a bummer, but you still really like your friends and you want to hang out. I've been in those situations, and as much as I like to hit the drum of have the conversation and fix the situation, I didn't mean to rhyme that, but put it in my fucking self-help GM book, have the conversation, fix the situation. there are times at which you like make the compromise. And so what I'll say here is, if you do make the compromise, the compromise should be a compromise. The compromise shouldn't be, and now my character is a mass murderer overnight. I'm cool with shooting guns at people. You should talk to your GM if you do decide you want to move your character towards doing combat stuff. Have the conversation. It's like, well, how do I get there? How does I want to see on screen, so to speak, how my character goes from being the pop idol who woke up from cryosleep for 100 years to someone who is willing to like slice someone with a sword or pull a trigger. And I want that to happen over the course of like a couple of sessions. And that should feel dramatic, and like start thinking about and talking at the table about what would make your character draw a weapon, what would make your character hurt someone, and in some way that you have the very good role of being the person at the table who can contextualize the violence of other characters and say like, yo, are you really gonna kill this person? And it will make it really cool if and when you decide like, this is the thing I've decided is worth fighting for. So like, I would say neither. I would say just like, if you're going to compromise on it, make sure to compromise it where you're still able to have the fun that you've kind of outlined here, which is about like understanding who your character is, and thinking about like who this person is after 100 years, and really role playing her. That's what I would say is like, those two things aren't necessarily incompatible, even though sometimes games like Starfinder might predispose you towards being someone who at the end of the day is willing to shoot some lasers at some space goblins or whatever,
Austin, while that is excellent advice, I want to make sure people don't forget the lessons of important works of literature.
Sure.
And in this situation, I of course mean the early Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie, The Rundown.
Yeah, right. Good. Oh, that's it. You got it. This is a good one.
Please go on.
I'm sure I don't need to remind everyone here of the plot of The Rundown, but in case anyone listening hasn't seen the movie, and honestly,
and once it's
the
spoiled,
podcast off right now, watching the whole movie and coming back, because this is the end of the. I'm going to tell you the end of the movie. But for the whole movie, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I think that's the name of the character.
Yeah, it's him.
Refuses to
name in every movie.
Refuses to use guns.
And what's the dude's name he's with?
Sean William Scott.
Okay, so not Jason Todd Scott, which is what I wrote into Google.
No, that's not right. Jason Todd is the Robin who died.
Who's Todd Scott?
I guess I spoiled that too.
Spoilers for Batman.
Okay, good.
Franchise.
Good. Great.
So he doesn't use guns. He's like this badass chasing people through the thing, but he doesn't use
Batman?
guns.
Yeah, Batman doesn't use guns.
No, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in The Rundown, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Gotcha.
And at the end of the movie, it turns out he doesn't use guns because he's the best person to ever use guns in the whole world. He's like shooting people from like 100 yards away with a shotgun. He's like, it's unreal. Like the movie, he's like a badass this whole movie, and then at the end, he's like, I don't use guns because I'm too good, and he just grabs 2 guns and kills like 50 people in 20 seconds. It's amazing.
So you're saying
you shouldn't be afraid to lean into that in your own story.
Right. Actually, Mary the pop idol was actually the greatest gunslinger known to this peaceful time. She did a whole thing around gunslinging, like a whole stage show around it once. It was great.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to get good at guns without killing people, probably. I don't know. I'm not good with guns.
It's weird. Batman also. That's also Batman's arc. When Batman finally pulls out a gun, he'll shoot people. Mostly just that one, though. So, Batman shot a gun. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Thank you for that.
We read about it on a previous Clapcast. We talked all about the anti-life equation. Anyway, we're going to move on.
What?
Any other thoughts here? The anti-life equation stuff? Yeah, what?
Yeah.
Didn't it?
Okay.
It
Was
must
that the
have.
lockjaw stuff?
Yeah, those, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. This one comes in from Parker, who says, I am GMing a Powered by the Apocalypse game, Monster of the Week, for the first time, and I wanted some advice on mixed successes in social situations. When in combat, it's pretty easy to put PCs in a tough spot, but when they're investigating a mystery, trying to cover something up, or some other social situation with stakes, I struggle to know how to handle a 7 to 9 roll, or even an outright failure. It isn't compelling just to have the NPC not be persuaded, but I don't know how to make moves against them that are more interesting and make sense contextually, especially when most of the keeper moves don't seem applicable. What are the ways to raise the stakes of failure and to make it interesting? So the first thing I would say is that it's almost certainly worth revisiting the actual moves you have available, or not the moves you have available, but the actual base moves that they're rolling, because on a 7 to 9, there will be some degree of clarity on most things, and sometimes that it can be kind of vague. I'm trying to find a basic sheet for Monster of the Week really quick. The basic moves, here we go. Give me a second. I'm going to find the basic moves. I actually really love anytime that they're like go to the text. I love it. Anytime I have to look at just moves and have to talk through some shit, this is my new favorite thing that we do on this podcast. All right, so the basic moves. All right, so like for instance, on investigating a mystery, they roll their sharp skill, and on 10 plus they hold 2. And a 7 to 9, they basically only get to ask one thing. And on a miss, it says, you reveal some information to the monster or whoever you were talking to. The keeper might ask you some questions which you have to answer. It's important that your attempts to investigate and the results you get from them are plausible and consistent with what's happening. The keeper, who's the MC or the GM or the DM here, says, how do you find that out? If you don't have a good answer, choose another method instead. And so like in a situation like that, you have a lot of leeway there, right? It's about maybe getting some information from them. It's about them revealing information to the monster they're hunting. And so, like, lean into that stuff. And the other thing that I'll say is, like, I am obviously the biggest fan in the world of, like, yes, you succeed, but there is a cost you didn't think of. Convincing someone... this is an example I'm stealing 100% from Adam Coble, who co-wrote Dungeon World. And it's his example for failing a circles roll in Burning Wheel. In Burning Wheel, you have a skill called Circles, which represents, or you have a stat called Circles, which represents your ability to, like, have a friend nearby, have someone you can count on, have someone you can call in a favor to. In Star Wars: New Hope, Princess Leia rolls a 7 to 9 on Circles. She rolls a 7 to 9, trying to contact her good friend Ben Kenobi, who she can trust, but she fails. She gets a mixed success, which means it takes a little longer to get there because it ends up in the hands of someone else who is also trustworthy, but not directly to the person that she was sending the message to. In Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo fails his Circles roll. And what he gets is Lando Calrissian. Lando is someone he can trust. He runs into Lando. Lando's cool. He gets to add Lando as a contact. Lando's already betrayed him. Lando actually cannot be trusted, and despite being an old friend, has already sold them out to the Empire. And so, yes, they get to dock the Millennium Falcon. You don't get the call where it's like, no, sorry, you're not allowed here, bye. Like, that's not good for the story. But a failed social role can look like a success at first, and then what you do is immediately start showing them the barrel of the gun. Immediately be like, something seems a little off here, or like, come on in, and like, he's normally a little more standoffish than this, or whatever, right?
Yeah, was C-3PO missing?
Right, yeah, exactly, for instance. Any other thoughts here? I mean, this comes up all the time, I think, in our games. Obviously, you're on the other side of it, but...
It's like... Yeah, it's because I, of course, don't have any experience in saying what happens when a roll fails. I've just failed a lot of rolls. But those are all great examples. And, yeah, Empire Strikes Back sure is a good movie.
It sure is. It sure is.
I wish Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was in
it. Hold on to hope, Art.
One day. The other thing is a lot of the moves in PBTA games, so like again, something like manipulate someone or something like read a situation. Either again, it'll be you get less information, or it will be give them something ahead of time, right? Like, yeah, I'll do it for you if you show me right now why that you'll come through with a promise, or like promise me that you'll give me X, or give me X now and I'll do a thing for you. That stuff is pretty actionable. And then the other thing is like missing should not just be no, it should be actually you've hit a nerve, or actually this person isn't who you think they are, or it's or someone else watched you succeed and now they're following you. Like it's a lot of going 3 steps away and seeing how if you fail to like, if you're trying to get into a closed bar and you're trying to sway the bouncer and you fail the roll or whatever, it can't just be the bouncer says no. It has to be the bouncer says like no and literally throws you into the middle of the street, or the bouncer says yes, but it turns out to be not the club inside you thought it was, and there's vampires in there or some shit, or it's yes you go in but they take your weapons from you, or yes you go in but you've actually been tailed all the way inside. Always be looking for that second step of a thing that turns things on their side. Same thing with like investigation. Like give them the information they need, but for me it's something like Powered by the Apocalypse, or something in like something in Scum and Villainy. Tick up the heat clock. Yes, give them the information they need, but make it clear that like what I do all the time is yes, or I threatened this, for instance, in the very first Scum and Villainy game, was yes, you can break this lock open, but it will be broken and it will be obvious that the lock has been tampered with, right? So when someone comes back later, they'll be able to gather evidence and know that this was broken into. And like once that happens, you've shown them a really big gun, because it means someone will be on the lookout for them. Those are the things that I'd say like are some of the ones I go to all the fucking time. You don't just have to do the things that your book says are your moves, or you can think about those in really broad ways. It's not just like put a villain on screen to show them a barrel of the gun or whatever, right? I think that's.
Is there a meme with you in it that's like failing a roll means that you get what you wanted, and it turns out it's the worst thing that ever happened to you?
Yeah, That's what a failure looks like. It happens, and you're not happy about it. Totally. Allie, do you have anything here?
No.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right. I think we hit that one pretty quick. I just thought I heard you start to speak earlier, and I wanted to give you the opportunity just in case.
Yeah, no, I haven't GM'd before. I like mostly ignore consequences when I'm playing games.
Great.
So it's fine.
Good.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, next one. So this one comes in from Josh, and I'm really curious for y'all as players about this as we are going towards this. Josh says, "Hi friends, wanted to ask what your thoughts were on best practices for ending campaigns. My Apocalypse World campaign looks like it might be ending soon, and I want to know what's important to you as GMs and players in the end of a campaign. We plan to end our current campaign and perhaps jump elsewhere in the world afterwards. Thanks, Josh." So I'll start with y'all. I'm really curious as we wrap TM in the next 2 weeks. What matters to you as when you wrap up a campaign?
I think for me, it kind of weirdly enough just comes down to like what I like in writing in general. Weirdly enough, where it's just like I want stuff to feel consistent with the characters. Like even if it's a bad ending, if it feels like I got there because of like my actions and it fits with the character I've been playing, then I'm pretty satisfied with how a campaign ends.
Right.
Yeah. That's all I got.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I think a lot about Aubrey in that way, right? Where like the end of Marielda was super intense, but you can draw such a clean line for each of the characters when we first see them on screen to what they're doing in the big final confrontation, you know?
Yeah, I think Counterweight's a really good example of that too. Like,
totally.
Made TV for that, but like everybody's story felt like consistent with them.
Totally. Yeah. Allie and Art.
Do you want to go or should I?
I don't know. I feel like beyond knowing that it's the end, obviously, and then like having everybody else at the table sort of know, like be in that mode, you know? I mean, I feel like the worst thing to end a campaign would be like, oh, it's a Tuesday, we're all sitting down, and then like
Mm-hmm.
being like, okay, that's it, or like whatever, like needing to make those big decisions because like suddenly we found like the big boss or like
Right.
whatever else.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't think that's happened for us, right? I think maybe Winter felt that way maybe a little bit. Or like, you know what would have actually, what would have, would be, what if we ended after September?
Yeah.
Right? We didn't do the finale of Counterweight. It was like, well, that's it. You win the day, and that's it. Or you lose, the end. That would have sucked, right? Because there was not that the same build.
Yeah. I mean, but like, I mean, even with TM, we were like, did we just record the last ever session
Yeah,
of that game?
yeah.
And like, we could have. I'm glad that we didn't.
Yes.
Because I feel like for something to end and to like wrap it up, you would want to like be able to sit down and be like, okay, what were my intentions here?
Yeah.
And how am I gonna hit those in the next 2.5 hours or whatever?
Totally. Exactly. I think that's like, it's a weird thing because it's such a collaborative thing that we do, but we should always be on the same page about, as close to as we can be, about like, where are we in this story? In the last couple of weeks, we've been having conversations as we've moved towards the end of Twilight Mirage, and there's been lots of like, yeah, I feel like I'm in the final act of my character. Like I feel like I'm going to start making choices towards closure, towards big picture like swings, big turns. Not only because like there's only a few episodes left, but because I feel like I've gotten what I needed out of the second step of this character's arc, and now we're moving into the final one. So yeah. Art, how about you?
I mean, I think there's like an importance of setting everyone up to succeed or fail in however they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is sure gonna feel apparent over the next couple weeks of Twilight Mirage, but I don't think you can get like too comfortable in your character going up to the end. If you know there's an end coming, you have to be prepared to make really big choices.
Right.
And just sort of like roll like because it's going away, right? You don't need to hold on to it the same way.
Right. There's like, you don't have to play conservatively. You don't need to play safely. Not that you should ever anyway, but we all do to some degree, right? I think about the last few episodes of Twilight Mirage, the ones that have already come out even, where it was like, there's a moment in a recent episode of Twilight Mirage where I'm literally pausing to look at my principles to make sure that I'm not like wavering in my duties when it comes to like, hey, this is a situation where a character could definitely be killed, could receive lethal damage, and we'd have to decide what happens from there. And fictionally speaking, it might be the case that they die. And I probably would not have been I probably would have tried to find a bigger loophole there 6 months ago, right? Or maybe not 6 months ago, because holiday time is also a time where it feels like any amount of plot armor. And again, we don't explicitly play with plot armor. Like, when we've done Dungeon World, I would never fucking fudge a death roll because I'm so interested in how that stuff would play out. But there is a degree of like, can I talk the players down from this? And I also don't think that players often will lean in that way in the dead middle or like the first act of a campaign,
Yeah, and I do want to say that if you're gearing up for finale and you're like, and the big thing in your finale is going to be a giant fight scene, you should probably think a little more about it, because I think that's the thing. I think like video games have improperly conditioned us to believe that that's like a really great climax when like the real, fighting Kefka is awesome. God, I'm a dinosaur.
You just saw it for the first time at Summer Games Done Quick. You're like, wow, cool fight.
Yeah, Fallen One is a real pain. But like that's a great fight because you're invested in it.
Yeah.
But like movies end in fights, but those fights are about, emotional conflicts in
Yes.
good movies.
Yes.
Like The Rundown starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Right, he doesn't use guns. Uh-huh.
Well, that's really about Sean William Scott and his dad, but it's not really important. And The Rock and guns.
Right.
But like the biggest moment in your finale should be an emotional moment and not well, he's got 5,000 hit points. Unless the 5,000 hit points is important to someone's arc in some way, like you set out from your village knowing that you would be the one to deal 5,000 hit points and damage one day.
Right. Which is not anything. It's not a thing. Like it's meant. I think about gameplay mechanics a lot, both for tabletop games and video games. And I do my best to think about them as analogy, or as analogy isn't even the right word. It's like what is the fucking word I'm looking for? It's another A word that's sort of like, it's not really. It's like closer to like fairy tale. But that's not right.
It's not allegory, right?
It is allegory. Thank you. I actually thank you very much.
That is the word. Okay.
Yeah,
100%. Right.
Yeah, I do my best to think about some mechanics as kind of an abstract allegory, where like we know, like I am the person who doesn't like the Uncharted games, but even I am kind of tired of the Drake kill so many people take, because it's allegorical action, and I would like there to be part of the reason I don't like that game is because Drake kills so many people, etc., etc. But like, I also think that for most video games and for a lot of tabletop games, something allegorical is happening. In XCOM, everybody goes one at a time. Combat doesn't work like that, right? Same thing with D&D. Everyone is constantly fighting each other. It's allegorical. And that doesn't mean that, like, it's allegorical for tactical decision-making, for your ability to have endurance and all that stuff that your characters have, right? And it's even allegorical for what does it take to succeed, right? It's a really broad allegory. Or even in something like Frozen Synapse or Frozen Synapse, depending on if you're from the UK or the US, a tactical combat game in which everybody moves at the same time, even that isn't just it's true. Even that is allegorical, and what it's doing is, like, overloading your brain with the huge canvas of possibility, because that's a game where you plot all of your character's moves, and so does the enemy, and so does your opponent, and then you hit go and you see what happens, and you can spend literally hours just doing test runs before you commit to your move and trying out different configurations. And that's not like, oh, that's what true combat is. It's not. The combat isn't someone stares at a screen and like tries out a million different combinations until it goes the way they want. But it's allegorical for the feeling of being overwhelmed because everything happens at one time. Things don't go 1, then 2, then 3. And so, I think that, like, in terms of death, in terms of big boss fights at the end of a campaign, in terms of, like, hey, we're all going to wrap up with something. Think about what the allegory is you're making. And think about what that means mechanically. Like, I think, again, with Counterweight, we were super clear, and we had a great tool. Shoutouts to Matt Mitchell for putting Firebrands in my hand, like, 2 months before we recorded the finale, and I read it and immediately saw everything I wanted there, right? Like, that's a game that is, from top to bottom, in line with, maybe not from top to bottom, it was hackable to be exactly what we wanted, right? I don't know that Counterweight was as factional as Firebrands was, but we leaned into that. We did a time jump so that it was possible to lean into, hey, the last time we saw these characters, the chime at least was like pretty tight. Now they're a little bit more spread out. Like they have other allegiances that are pulling on them. But the core thing of, like, fight against your friends, team up with your rivals, fall in love with your enemies. Like, yeah, that's Counterweight, top to bottom, right? And the gameplay mechanics allegorically are about that sort of messiness, that entanglement. And so think about whatever that, as a GM, think about what you're giving your players as their big final challenge, or if there even is one, or how that's set up, because you'll be communicating something with them. At the end of Winter in Hyron, and again, I'm going to do my best to be vague here, I gave one side the feeling of just, like, the most frustrating conversation they'd ever be part of. Just the feeling of, like, you can't talk this person out of depression, and you can't talk this person out of having a chronic illness or a terminal illness in this case. and he's just a stubborn asshole, and he's gonna be a stubborn asshole, and the combat needed to feel like that too. Right, the combat needed to feel like, where is this fucking dog? Like, how come this person keeps showing up in a boat? What, like, that needed to be in line. And then at the other hand, for the party, for Mountain Party, which was dealing with these like larger than life things, these magic that didn't make any fucking sense, like unpredictability, I needed that conflict to feel geographically like unsettling and unclear, and the future to seem open-ended, and so we did that conflict inside of the where that big last fight happens, and then I ended that, and it was like, okay, we've gotten through the magic shit, and then the actual conclusions of that are the party fracturing, right? It is conversations between characters that ends up being so important at the end of that, because they've been pushed to the brink by these larger than life, hard to understand things, and that is that again was like how I was trying to, and that's it's the end of a year, right? Obviously that the Dungeon War campaign continues, and we'll pick back up, and we'll be having this conversation in a much bigger way. And I'll say that that's the last thing, right, is have that conversation. In the last couple of weeks, I mean, if you just look at our Twilight Mirage chat internally, the last little bit has been me just fucking crying out loud, trying to figure out how the fuck to do this finale. But there was but I was aided in that by lots of conversation about what people wanted to see there, right? Allie, you have a great line up here. I just had it and scrolled and lost it. Where'd it go? You said, that's not it. Unified? What did you say? Let's see.
What did I say?
You said a good thing, and I'm looking for it and not seeing it. Oh, it's up here. It's up further. It's up further. You said, nope, that's about Grand. That's super about Grand. Here we go. It almost feels like the question isn't, quote, is unification possible, but more like, how are we meeting the needs of people who are in the system? And that was super useful for me to start thinking through mechanics and games that we wanted to look at for the finale, because, yeah, that is it. It's how are we meeting the needs of people who maybe all have different ideas about what the future looks like. And so it's like forgoing, this sort of, instead of doing the game of like, by hook or by crook, we're all going to agree. Like, it's like, okay, no, like, what games make it possible for us to think about survival? What mechanics make it possible to think for us to think about, working on things over a long period of time and addressing needs. And that was super useful. And we had, you, Janine, like a lot of people in this conversation laid out different things. And for me, that's such an important conversation to end up having, right? Like, and sometimes it means tossing things aside. And I think we'll probably wrap back around to this. We're not tossing things aside, but prioritizing, right? And I said that for me, one of the things that with Twilight Mirage, that was one of my guiding principles from the jump, was that science fiction lets us imagine different worlds than the ones that we can imagine inside of naturalistic, realistic contemporary fiction. Because contemporary fiction that takes place in the here and now, that is being honest about the here and now, it's really hard to imagine a future without capitalism, for instance, or a future where we have gotten our shit together to address climate change in a substantial way. It's really hard for me to genuinely believe that stuff because the world is so terrible. But science fiction is a hammer that can break through that shell, and I can be like, oh yeah, it's science fiction. It's science fiction, so let's just focus on the outcome. Let's focus on imagining a different world. And so that is something like I need to bring forward. So as a GM, think about that stuff. What were the big picture ideas that you really wanted to bring forward? And even if you can't bring forward all of them and put a nice wrapper on all of them, pick the ones that mean the most to you, and try to more importantly, the ones that have worked really well with your players. It took me way too long into this season to think about writing intros and coming up with characters and coming up with situations that were about the things that my players were interested in. And going into the finale, that's hyper important, or going into the end of any campaign, it's like, okay, you've thrown all this stuff out there, you've put up all these paintings in the gallery, which are the paintings that people are gathering around? focus in there. It's okay that you have other stuff that you thought was really interesting. If they're not into it, fuck it. Like, it goes away. But it doesn't need to be the focus of the end of your campaign. Focus in on where people are already spending their attention, where they're already raising their flags. That is what I would say. Any other thoughts here about ending things? All right, let's keep on moving. So this next question does have a spoiler for Marielda and a spoiler for Counterweight. I've edited them out as best I could, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it through with blanks, and then I'm going to read it again through... I'll just read it through with blanks, and if everybody on the call is like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, then I think we're good. Because I think that's the thing. And if someone on the call is like, I don't know what that is, then I think what I'm going to do is be like, hey, I'm going to spoil this, jump ahead 15 seconds. I hope that works. So, This one's from M, who says, when you have a secret about a player character, Audi being blank, say, or Castile being blank, how early in advance do you have that planned out? Do you have any strategies for letting those pieces fall into place? Those are my favorite kinds of revelations throughout the show, and the exact kind of evil GMing I hope to emulate someday. Thanks, M. Does everyone know what these blanks are?
Can we get a little... Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I'm not sure about some...
Is it which would Marielda or Counterweight?
Who knew about these blanks first?
So I think that's part of the question. I think in both...
I was under the impression that you knew the first one well before.
Yes.
And that I did not get the same impression about the second one. But maybe that's because Marielda was shorter.
That's funny. I knew Marielda way before I knew Counterweight.
But not you.
Wait. What do you mean
when
not
did
me?
Allie know blank?
Oh, I knew when Austin said it.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Okay.
But we all know what we're talking about here. With both of these things?
I know what we're talking about.
I know. No, you know. God, I can't believe we lost the episode of Art and Austin. It's gone forever now. Anyway, the Art and Austin show will be back in 2019. So
it's at Showtime though, so get ready to pay for it.
God. Ugh. I wish I could talk about some shit I can't talk about. I'm just saying, pay your people. That's my rule. That's as a someone who works with people, pay your people. So Iathra says Castile being a cat. Yep, that's it. That's the big spoiler. So in both of those cases, I knew ahead of when the players knew, but in the Castile case, I knew from the moment, from character creation, right, Allie? Because I had this good idea. I was like, oh, actually.
To the point that I didn't change my character idea, but I was like, okay, we can go with that. And yeah, that was her deal, and I didn't know. And it was, I feel like there's part of me that wishes that I had known sooner.
Yeah.
Because there were some hooks in Castile that weren't there that I feel like if I had known that before we started that season would have been more fun to play with.
Sure.
But
the thing, my only counter to that is I thought we had 3 or 4 more missions. Right? You learned it in the second full mission. It's just that we only did another one. We only did a downtime and then one more. And so in my mind, it was like, okay, well, don't do it in the first one. But then when the end of the second one, it'll come out. This ghost will tell her, and that'll be cool. And then we'll have 3 more missions to really play it out with her. No, we didn't. We ended up ending Marielda way too quick. It happens. It turned out our games go long, and we need to be smarter about that sometimes. Audi was the opposite. Audi came much later, ahead of not that much earlier than that episode. I mean, there's a pretty someone. there's a. I'm trying to see if I can give an answer, or if I can talk about this without spoiling it, but I can't. So you can tell that I'm excited about it in a way. Not that I wasn't excited about the reveal for Castile, but the Castile reveal, another rhyme, was a thing that I knew was coming, and so I was a little more practiced with it, and I had the delivery mechanism extremely clear in my mind, whereas the Audi one I had only figured out a month before, a couple of weeks before, and had not been like eager to. I wasn't like, I'm going. Now is the time to reveal this. Whereas it totally, like, I made the mission where Castile's deal gets revealed. Fuck off. Words. But the Audi one I'd figured out like a month prior while doing some prep, based on the way Jack had been playing the character, based on how I was starting to come to understand some of the fiction. Like, I think one of the funny things to remember is the Audi reveal happens, and then an animal out of context happens. And remember, an animal out of context isn't a thing we hit play on. We played that game, which means we didn't know any of that shit. I didn't know blank. Audi being blank, I didn't know blank. I knew blank from a couple of other things. You know what I mean? Like, what?
No, go.
You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
We had to develop what blank was. And so I knew part of blank, but I didn't know all of blank. and so I saw an opportunity to kind of push the button, as it were, and took that opportunity, especially because I knew that Jack would be in town soon and that we could record a cool thing together. So sometimes you pull the trigger. So I guess what I'm saying is there is no single solution there. Those revelations are fun. As Ali said, sometimes you should bring the player in on them. Sometimes you should bring the whole table in on them way earlier, because dramatic irony is great. We had that whole conversation about Grand Magnificent a month and a half ago, the last downtime episode, where Art was like, I think Grand Magnificent is done. That's a conversation that needed to happen at the table, right? And I went back and forth on that, where I was like, do I want to leave that in? Is that like showing a hand to, like, no, leave it at the table. It's an interesting conversation, and it's useful for the players to then play around. Like you just said, Ali, if you had known about Castile, there's stuff that you would have been able to play towards that would have brought it together. That's actual play, you know? I'm trying to think if there's any other examples of this in this show. There's lots of like things the players learn that aren't about their characters, or about the world, obviously. Twilight Mirage didn't really have this, right? I guess,
Not
like,
yet.
Signet.
Yeah, we still got some shit to do.
Yeah, I gotta look at my notes. Maybe there's some shit in here. I mean, yeah.
I'm gonna say something out loud just to see how it sounds.
Yeah, go for it.
Denmark Magnificent.
Great. I love it. Anyone else have OCs they want to bring to the table? No?
Aren't all of our characters
Yeah,
OCs?
Yeah, we do that.
Save that for future episodes.
No? Okay.
I feel like, was the Hella stuff one of these? Not as much.
Which
You know, the
Hella?
Hella thing?
Sort of. But like, it's so much lighter because it's about like Hella's heritage, not about Hella as a person, right? Or like what Hella's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing that's super important about these, and maybe that's the most important thing. I never want to do one that undermines the character as played. And so for Audi, for example, I made it super clear that blank was true, and also that Audi was consistent with being Audi for that entire game. For Castile, there was an excuse for why Castile didn't remember being blank, but the thing that I love about that season is that for the rest of that season, Castile has a relationship with having been blank, you know? And there are so many scenes that you did, Ali, where you were like addressing that part of who she was, but addressing it as the person she was now, not just like slipping back into that character. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Actually, Campbell in the chat says Grand Magnificent was a divine all along. He's going to make a new body for himself. Grand, you ever think of that? You ever think about making a new body for someone?
How do we know that hasn't already happened?
Yeah, good question. Andy, do you have anything else here?
No, but I was thinking. I think we had a very minor one, like with Ephraim, when I took
Oh, true.
end of the game, and you just said, "Oh, I know where Ephraim's powers come from," and you didn't even say it explicitly to me, and I was just like, "Oh shit, yeah, I see it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are fun. I actually just realized we also definitely did this with... This is what we did in a weird way individually all the time in Faction Game, right? Which is like, we all had our factions that we cared about and that we had our own fucking twist shit for, and then also we did it to the other faction characters constantly, where it was like, oh, actually, here's the thing that's happening with this character over here. And that was fun. Like, that's a different vibe because you're not embodying that same character in the same way, but, you know. All right, let's keep moving. A couple more and we'll be out of here. This one comes in from Jack, not Jack DeKeat.
You sure?
Something I love about your show is the way tragedy, both big and small, is focused on and handled, partially due to the fact that I find it much easier and more satisfying to engage with and pick apart things that make me sad. However, since I form this kind of bias in how I engage with media, I often find myself bogged down in my own storytelling by my focus on tragedy and worry about the negative impact it could have, particularly in the context of being a GM, when I am also fully capable of recognizing the fact that not everyone loves to be sad all the time. Where do you find the balance when your games cover such heavy themes and events, along with having many characters dealing with their own personal tragedies? What's that? What's up, Allie? What's good?
This is okay. You know what it is that
what is it?
Sometimes that's just the thing that we're doing, right? Like,
right.
I don't know. I think the way that we balance it is usually by like, I don't know that like the stuff that gets really heavy is ever the stuff that fully defines a character.
Right.
So there's that.
Like, I think it can be interesting. On my side, I definitely have the characters who I'm like, okay, this character is largely defined by some tragedy. Like, Morning's Observation is like, I can't go an episode with Morning's Observation without having him snap at somebody. And that comes from a place. That comes from a trauma, right? Like, Morning's Observation has been tricked by a government to throw his life away. And he will never get over that fact. And he thinks he has it worse than most people. And he plays that. And that's like, he leans into it sometimes. Because to him, everybody else remembers, for instance, everyone that they knew in their lifetimes, right? And maybe other people have died, they've lost people, but he's lost everybody until he met these new people. And so I play that, and it means that it can get really heavy. Also, he was deeply invested in Calcium, like deeply, deeply, deeply invested in Calcium. And people are like that. And like characters in general, outside of the most morose ones, tend to be able to be a vehicle for lightness and for sadness, or for tragedy or for anger or whatever, right? And so the thing that I'll say is, like, even if, like me, you're super interested in the tragedy, let yourself have the jokiness. Let those characters be on screen and not have to just be yeah, I guess what I'm really saying is, don't fear that by being jokey, you won't be able to be heavy also. As Keith points out in the chat, Keith loves this show. Keith J. Carberry in the chat, who's either the cast member Keith J. Carberry or a fan of our Primetime Adventures game and has named their account after the character from that show, Keith J. Carberry. And they say, I don't ever like to be sad, and I love Friends at the Table. And I think that's the thing is, like, I think Keith has had some sad characters, but that's a different conversation. I think that it is 100% true that, like, you can tell a story that deals with those heavy themes without necessarily leaning into that, and so you shouldn't feel too bad as a GM that, like, hey, I have players who want to have a good time, even if I have this big tragic story that I'm interested in, if that makes sense. And then trust yourself to be able to deliver that good time also. Andy and Art, you've both played some sad characters over the years.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of, like you said, you kind of just need to make sure it's balanced and your character isn't just there to make people cry.
Right.
Like, that's not fun in a lot of ways because you get numb to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you lean into the sadness all the time, you get numb to it. Like, that's the thing you see in, like, movies and stuff, too. If something is just constantly the same emotion being bombarded at you, you kind of get numb.
Yes.
So
totally.
if you're trying to make your players cry every session, it's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
It's basically just like knowing when to do it and knowing when to go really hard with it is
Right.
more effective than just going hard with it all the time.
You can also, like, loud, quiet, loud your way through this Pixie style, where it's like, and I don't just mean that in terms of, like, happy, sad, happy, or whatever. Sometimes I will lead with tragedy and then spin it to be like, hey, actually, this is like, there's something underneath this that is fundamentally sad, but look at how you saved these people. Look at how you helped people here. I think the Gift 3 Sailors of the arc is actually exactly this, which, like, begins with something that is very scary and very sad about the, lost children who have left home or have gone missing, and why that's happened. And then by the end of that session, or the end of that mini arc, y'all had found a solution that genuinely was one of the feel-good moments of the season. And it maintained a bit of the sadness, right? Because caught up in the Sailors of the Ark was the fact that the Sailors of the Ark needed to exist in the first place. But you can hit someone in the chest emotionally without it necessarily being a bad, tragic thing. It can be an uplifting thing that still makes them go like, God damn, Art, you play maybe the saddest characters season to season.
You know how hard I didn't want to do a tragic character this season?
I not only know how hard, we could go to the tail of the tape. We have IMs where you're like, I don't want to play.
Well, it's not over yet.
It's true. That's true. It's good to remember that.
I was gonna make a really bad analogy there.
Okay, well.
Be like, things look pretty bad for Hamlet, and then I remember how Hamlet ends.
Oh my God!
Spoilers for Hamlet: everyone dies. Damn, I'm just ruining shit tonight.
God.
No, I don't know. I don't think there's like some. I think you need if you just had sweet all the time, it wouldn't taste good.
Right.
You got to be able to mix that up.
Right, but like you're someone. Let me push back on that a little bit. So many of your characters have very rarely been sweet in that sense.
I mean, I would argue that I've never been as sugary sweet as Grand Magnificent stepped off that boat as.
Which boat?
The space boat.
Like, at the beginning of the season, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm rooting for. I'm hoping that we end up spring with a happy ending for our old pal Hadrian.
Yes, me too. He's in a really good place right now, right?
I mean, so I could end up with 2 out of 3. I don't know. I mean, counterweight spoiler warning. I'm going to give everyone 10 seconds.
You should jump ahead 30 or 40 seconds if you don't want counterweight spoilers here.
Yeah.
Maybe just jump a minute.
Spoilers. Maybe a whole minute. Counterweight spoilers. Okay, here I go. Cassandra had to die.
Uh-huh.
That was the only way out for them. Cassandra tried to run and couldn't. That was it. That was the only way that character could go. The fun parts of that character are in the middle. And it had to go that way.
Yeah.
Counterweight spoilers over. Counterweight spoilers over.
They can't. If they're skipping ahead, they would have missed that the counterweight spoilers are over.
Well, maybe they skipped to that part.
True. Fair. Yeah. Yeah, when we'll see. Like I mean, we were just talking about endings, and I think Allie, you were the one who were just like 2 days ago. Were like, we should all have a big talk about spring before we start spring, and like, yes, we should. I'm super curious. We do such a strange thing on this show. There's so many of us, and we all want different things in terms of, and I don't mean that in like, we just all want different things. This isn't working out. I mean this in terms of just like, that's how taste works. You know, I think if any of us were to sit down and write out a bullet point list of things we wanted to happen in the next season, not things our characters wanted to happen, but things we wanted to happen, none of those lists would overlap more than 25%. And that, I don't think, is a flaw. I think that is the strength of the medium, because especially when you play it super collaboratively, you end up with something that, as an individual, you wouldn't get. I think about the Vault of Anticipation arc. It's not how I thought that was going to go. I didn't think, 100%, that's why I had those characters at the top, where it was like, go get the thing, and then bring it to one of these 3 factions, and you were like, nah. Instead, this. And that's way cooler. That's way cooler, you know? That happens every session. Every session. And sometimes it stings, because, for instance, I've set up a really great set piece in a very beautiful winter cabin retreat inside of a spaceship, and instead we stay in a warehouse for 90 minutes. And it stings, but it's still better than if you'd gone to that fucking winter cabin retreat. So, that is, like, the strength of this, is that I think that there is a disconnect often between what people want and what ends up coming out is instead something that none of them individually would have come up with. And that should be the case with this sort of tragic stuff too. Because here's the other thing as a GM. You don't know what's going to hit your players all the time. Sometimes you do a thing, you're like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. And you're like, oh wait, it feels like the tone at this entire table has taken a shift for the worst. What happened? And you're like, oh, that was really sad, that thing I just did. Whoops. And other times you're like, I got him. I got this dope. I'm going to they're not going to, bam, here's some sad shit. And they're like, yeah, I killed the goblin. Like, okay. Somewhere. I'm playing the world's tiniest violin for this goblin, I guess. Whatever. And that almost happened, I think, with, like, a couple of things that I want. You know, there are characters who, like, I have put out in the world to be like, okay, this is supposed to be someone who's sympathetic. And, like, no, not at all. And that you just have to roll with it. They're not sympathetic. You're not going to bring them over to the sympathy, and your sad story is not going to land. Pivot. So, you know.
So it was a winter cabin?
It was, yeah. It was Camp David. It was Camp David in the winter, is literally what it was. So that is what that was. Yeah, if you listen to today's intro, so that's the thing I do sometimes. Unlike a real campaign where you're just playing at your table, I have the benefit of cut material being material that can go into intros. And that was a really good example of this too, though, which is like, or the ending question, which is like, so I described my first draft of today's intro. The intro today is a character walking around at this like diplomatic retreat, thinking about what she needs to do to bring her utopia into existence. And the first draft of that was like filled with weird factional stuff. Was like, here's who's attending this diplomatic retreat. Here's who's going to show up. And it was me trying to like get the exposition in at the last second so that people who were listening would know what was happening at that retreat. And I was like, that's not Twilight Mirage. That might have been Counterweight. I don't think it would be High Run. It was definitely Marielda. And the Marielda version of it, I absolutely would have leaned into, all the political factions vying over control of the city, or whatever. Here, what was important was her emotional state, and that was what would resonate for, hopefully, between listeners and the events that 14 and Grand were going through, was here is some emotional grounding to the exposition. It's still going to be the exposition about our prophet and blah, 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 blah. But, like, it's not going to be the exposition about all these other characters where just, like, name-dropping people isn't going to cause any effect. Instead, focus in on what is going to cause effect that's in theme with the rest of everything you do. And that is what I try to do there. And so keep that in mind as you're doing sad stuff, is like, hey, what actually fits into the stuff that you've succeeded at here already? All right, last one today from Ray. Given that smart characterization is one of your goals as a podcast, I'm hoping that you have some advice about how to bring characters out of dark emotional places. I've been playing the same character for the past 2 years and will probably continue for another 2, given how the game's narrative is progressing. About a year ago, I was depressed, and my unhappiness seeped into the character choices I made. My character became a spy, working against their friends, killed a well-liked NPC, and behaved dismissively towards the other characters in the game. Over time, I recovered, but my character didn't. I just didn't know how to get her out of the characterization hole I had dug. I discussed this with my GM, and they suggested rolling a new character. However, I was too emotionally invested in my original character, and I felt like I owed it to her to fix things. Because we couldn't come up with a better solution, my GM and I decided to retcon it all. My character doesn't remember any of it, and they were absolved of any blame. I feel like I cheated myself and my character out of doing the work to put her on a more positive path. How have you redeemed characters or recovered from character choices that you regret? Do you have any advice to help characters grow out of dark places? I'm going to say right now, we are going to talk spoilers about everything we've ever recorded. Otherwise, we would not be able to have this conversation. So, if you've listened...
Are you sure this isn't a post-mortem question that you jumped the gun on?
No. Because I want to know what you're doing. This is actually, for me, was about other characters. This, to me, was like a very big hella question. We can revisit it for sure, but I haven't seen proof that you've done it yet, Grand.
I don't know that I know how to do it.
And that's why we should have this conversation now.
I was going to ask if anyone knows the answer to this question, send me a message.
Right. I mean, our answer is not going to be a retcon, right?
I don't know.
I guess it could be. The Twilight Mirage is wild, y'all. Right? We've already seen... I mean, Choir's already retconned an entire... Again, we're going to spoil everything going for, or everything that's already been released. Nothing that's been unreleased. But maybe I don't know. No, nothing that's been unreleased. But like Choir retcons history to bring into being an entire new culture, right? So, in the Twilight Mirage, could a different Grand Magnificent be walking around out there? I guess that's a thing we could talk about. That's sad.
I was just going to pitch you on some sort of holodeck malfunction.
I see. I don't think that's it. I don't think that's going to be it, unfortunately. So what do y'all think? And y'all have had some characters who have been in some fucking holes. Can we start with you, Allie, since I mentioned Hella?
Sure. I mean, I feel like the Hella stuff is like straightforward, but I guess it isn't, where it was just like, I guess because we had that break especially,
right.
It was just like,
yeah.
I know why Hella did it, but I also know that she didn't feel great about it. So, like, the mission for season 2 or whatever was like, how do I repent for this? And, like, how dedicated would she be? Like, because the one action isn't the thing that, like, changed her mind for the rest of her life. But, like, it's a slow path towards realizing that the decisions you make are bad. In terms of this question, I don't know. I feel bad because, like, at some point, I don't know that you should feel super bad about just letting go of a character if you really feel like you've had a hard time, like, just getting out of it. Like, that isn't like a failing on any part. But, like, if it's a character that you're staying with, like, really try to think about, like, okay, how do they feel about the things that they did, and, like, how are you going to show that on screen now? I think a way that helped with that a lot was that, like, Janine was able to introduce Adair, and then we also had, like, all of the Hella Hadrian stuff, so it was like, we know that she has the capacity to treat people in her life very badly. Mm-hmm. Introducing characters that, like, she would have to care about or try to protect, or, like, at least just try to do something differently than that one thing. How successful is that going forward? And I think that, like, how protective, quote unquote, she was of Adair, or at least trying to be helpful, was an easier way to, like, show that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is all it's about those material things, and one of the things that helped there was like the world offered opportunity. I don't think the world, in this case, you're right, it's a dare, it's another player character. Like if I could, one of the things I'm not happy about with Winter is that I didn't play up Adelaide enough at all throughout that entire season. I was just like, my headspace just was not there. I'm not looking for like a pat on the back here, like or whatever. Like I'm genuinely in post-mortem mode to some degree, which is like, my advice is for you to ask your GM to think about ways in which you like to, again, have that conversation, fix the situation, talk through what would recovery look like. And then the second thing that Ali hit on was time away, but then a return. And so I don't know if you're still playing this character. Maybe there's a way to unretcon the retcon. I don't fucking know. But if there is, consider doing that and then saying, I'm going to take a break from this character to play a different character for a while. Not to, I'm going to stop playing this character. Say like, hey, this character is just not doing interesting shit for the next 6 months. This character is like getting their life together a little bit. This character is working on themselves. This character is out on a farm somewhere. This character is on a journey. And maybe we'll check in with them. Maybe once a session, you get like a scene as that character. But you're not there. You're not ready to take over that character again yet. Instead, you're going to keep playing this new character. And it's not about like, I'm done, I'm out. It's things don't have to be that binary. And so I would love for you to go talk with your GM and try to figure out a solution to where you can have that experience still, right? Like, maybe it isn't that your character suddenly remembers and feels guilty all of a sudden again, but maybe there's something at the back of their minds that's like, I did some bad stuff. Like, I don't know. You talk to your GM, and I my hope, in my experience, the second I start thinking about these things, my brain just fucking opens up. I go cosmic brain, thinking of all the possibilities with what can be done there. And so I would say try to have that conversation for sure, and try to return to that stuff and look for an Adair in your campaign, even if that Adair is an NPC or if that Adair is a faction that they care about or a location that they care about and want to take care of. That's a huge thing. A cat, a pet, a plant they have to protect, for instance. God, that was the first bit of prep for season for Winter and Hyron, by the way. Andy, you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I can't talk about it because it's upcoming, but you and I had a really good exchange on a recent episode with Echo and some of this. And so I guess that's just a teaser for people.
Yeah.
But like bringing like you said, bringing in another character or just doing anything that sort of forces them to confront it, whether it's something they're running away from or something that's really haunting them, forcing them to confront that can lead to sort of, it can take your character progression from being static to being like back in motion again, is how I'd say. Like, because that's the thing with mourning, right? Is it's one of those things, like, even in real life, like your character's in mourning, it's going to be like you are stuck for a little while. That's just how it feels. But then something happens that can get you moving again, and there's no reason why tabletop games can't work like that, right?
Totally, exactly. I think that is, and it's fair to have the conversation of like, hey, I just don't have an NPC I can connect to. I think that was a big thing that has come out about Grand Magnificent in the recording that even started, right? It's like Grant and Waltz get along all right. Grant and Morning's Observation kind of click, but Grant has never had the sort of like the kind of relationship that Tender and Morning's Observation have, or the kind of relationship that Show and 1415 have, or the kind of relationship that Gig has with Kent, or that even has with Cascabel. Like, there's lots of these NPCs who fill that need, and Grant hasn't had that character. So maybe that's one way you could drag yourself out of this whole art. You think has that come up?
You've known, what happens, right? You know that you're 3 episodes ahead of air, right?
Only 2. But yes.
That's gonna be 1 episode?
Yeah, dog.
Oh my god.
Downtimes are 1 episode.
Time on your calendar.
Yeah. It actually wasn't that long,
it's
said.
It's breezy. It's like an hour and a half.
No. The downtime.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah,
It's big. It's big, but I don't think it's that much bigger than most downtimes. Let's see.
It's trying.
Well, now that I don't have to record a 30-minute outro to make it the finale, it's definitely not as long as it could be.
I mean, my file's 4:45.
Mine was not that long. Why was yours 4:45?
You were late.
Right. And y'all didn't start playing before I got there.
You don't know.
Oh, fuck. See, then I don't know.
A lot of important stuff happened there. You'll have to hear it on air.
Oh, man. Jeez.
I think there's like a couple things here. One is like the whole like you don't have to worry as much about like other characters forgiving you because you can kind of make it happen. Like the other characters should forgive you because the players want to keep playing with you.
No. And we know that. No, because you know that. Because I was just looking at our chat from like a year ago. And we absolutely had a conversation that was like, no, I don't know that my character would forgive this other character.
Who said that?
You. Arthur Martinez to me, to Austin Walker.
About what?
About the Thrown Away episode. Right?
Yeah.
Which is like, no. It's like sometimes characters do come to a divide that doesn't make sense to just, like...
But
I'm not saying that's the case here.
But, like, could you get that way with the whole table?
I think that experience got that way to the whole table. But yes, I think so. I think you could. I think that Grand is at risk of it.
No, Grand's going to be fine.
Okay.
I think the other thing...
Or I guess here's what I'm saying is I don't think it's I think that's what has been interesting about the way you're playing Grand is that you are making choices as a player that are pushing Grand into a position where if he does want to maintain those relationships, it can't be because the players at the table want that relationship to continue. Or else...
No, that's I think the nice thing about this. Because I know it's ending, I don't have to worry about the characters. I just have to worry about
right
what is objectively true, and in like a smaller sense, like the audience. I don't have to play to the table anymore.
Right.
I have to play to the balcony. I would also like to spoil another piece of pop culture.
Okay.
Season 5, episode 11 of The Simpsons, Homer the Vigilante.
Uh-huh.
And with one of my favorite lines about exactly this.
Yeah.
I'm going to give everyone a second in case they want to
Simpsons spoilers.
Season
Simpsons
5,
spoilers.
episode 11.
Skip ahead 30 seconds.
So we have 30 seconds. And that quote is, dramatic pause for people skipping ahead, no, dig up, stupid.
Right.
Right. The context, they're in a hole, yeah. They've dug too deep. They're trying to dig out of it, and he's going to dig up.
Like the dwarves? Like they dug too deep? Like Balrog?
No, not like that. It's not a metaphor. It's just a regular hole. And while it doesn't work in real life, I do think it works in the games a little bit. I think
digging up, you're saying?
Yeah, I think you can dig up.
Right. I played Minecraft.
I really haven't. Can you dig up in that?
Sort of.
Spoilers for Minecraft. You can
Sorry, spoilers. Can we jump ahead 30 seconds? Sort of. You can dig diagonally up, right? That's the way it works. And maybe that's actually yeah, there you go.
See, that's the technique.
That's the
But
technique.
you're going to get dirty going up.
You are. You're going to get dirty. And sometimes you're going to fall in pit holes. You're going to hit a hole. Oh, shit, there's already a hole down here. True, Jesse M in the chat says, you can dig up and then jump and put ground under you. Also true.
Oh.
Also true. But again, just decipher these metaphors for hot tips. It's ARG. A hot ARG. Did you leave that mention of the ARG in? Allie, did you pull it?
No, that's in there. Is that in the big one? Is that the long one?
No, it's in the 14 grand one. I don't know if it's come up yet. It might not have come up yet. We should cut that.
No, I heard someone in our Discord was talking about the ARG, which means
Okay, it must be in there.
The ARG was the wrestling chart.
Okay, that was from that
Okay.
Clapcast. There's another thing in the next episode. Then cut that thing.
Okay.
You'll hear it. You'll know it when you hear it.
I haven't listened. Okay.
I really.
Oh, is it the secret?
Yeah, it's a secret.
Okay, that's a whole different thing. But
It's
yeah.
not.
What
The
are we
secret's an
talking-
ARG.
Yeah.
When we cut, can you tell me what the hell
No,
we're
I
talking
can't.
about?
I made
right
an agree. I made a blood agreement.
All right, I'll tell you.
You don't know it
I
either.
know.
No, you don't.
But I know what the conversation that Art
Oh,
was in.
yes.
We're talking about that he doesn't.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, if I was in the conversation, I think I could know about it.
All right.
Oh, I would like to encourage people to scroll up. Jess had some good reading suggestions for our tragedy conversation.
Oh, awesome. I missed those entirely. Where are they?
It's up a little bit. She's JMT.
Oh, that's Jess. Hi,
Yeah.
Jess. Hi.
She has. We all had to anonymize.
Anonymized. I think you got it. Anonymize.
Our online handles recently because someone's trying to get an academic job.
Fair. Fair. Well, now you've spoiled this one. So anyone who's like, I'm going to find out who it is.
I mean, if anyone listening to this is hiring professors, hire my wife. Don't. If you're listening to this, you probably don't care how my Twitter reflects upon her qualification.
I can't believe we've already gotten to please hire my wife. That's
Well, don't put this in the real episode.
Now.
Jess says, I don't play these games, but I'm pretty sure everyone should go read Sienna and Guy's Ugly Feelings and Jack Halberstam's The Queer Art of Failure. Thank you for those recs. All right. I think that's...
we already knew about one of those because we tried to trademark The Queer Art of Failure for us. God.
Oh, that's us. That's going to do it for us today. Remember, if you have questions, you can send them over to tipsattetable@gmail.com. I do my best these days to try to get them up on the screen pretty quick. So if you have questions, like getting them in front of us is a really good way of not be like a lot of these did come from the document that we still have that still has like 30 pages of questions. But new ones are very likely to be like, oh, I can build a theme around this. It's like, I'll take these two questions and then find 3 or 4 other ones in the pool that combine into a really good episode. So thank you as always for hanging out with us. And as always, you can support the show at friendsofthetable.cash. I think that is going to do it for us. Anyone else have any final words or thoughts or prayers?
So who else is in the rundown? Anybody else I know? Or...
Rosario Dawson and
See, look at that.
What's his
Okay.
name? The old guy. Very funny.
Christopher Walken.
That's him.
Oh!
Yeah.
The guy everyone... Okay, yeah, I love that guy.
It's on
Everybody does
Netflix.
this silly voice.
Directed by Peter Berg, who also directed Very Bad Things, Friday Night Lights, the movie, The Kingdom, the movie.
I thought you just meant he's only directed very bad things. I was like, damn, okay.
Okay, well, I'll keep going then. Hancock.
Oh!
Battleship.
Okay, it's way better than Hancock, or I haven't seen Battleship, but I assume Battleship.
Yeah,
Was
these
Rihanna
are...
in that? I bet it's fine.
Yeah.
I bet it's not.
There's a Virtuality TV movie? What is Virtuality the TV movie? Is this based on the TV, the movie? No. Have you all ever seen Virtuality, the real movie?
No.
With Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe? Is that what the name of that movie is? What's the name? Virtuosity. That movie's called Virtuosity. Not as good. Virtuality. That's the ticket. Virtuosity is dope. What's up?
You're saying those words, but in my mind so clearly came The Gamer with Gerard
Butler.
whoever.
I had a professor who loved Gamer.
That movie's secretly amazing, I think.
So this professor of mine, two things I'll tell you about this professor of mine. One, he loved the philosophers Deleuze and Guattari more than anyone I've ever known. They are very difficult philosophers to get and love, and he got them and loved them. Two, it once came. He is radical leftist professor who I used to work under at Cal Arts. And it came up at a visiting professor dinner once. Sometimes a professor comes and like gives a talk, and then everybody goes out to dinner. And we did that, and it came up. The question of guns came up, and he was like, he's pro gun control, but also really enjoys shooting guns at a range. And I was like, when was the last time you shot a gun? He said, well, actually, I haven't shot one in a long time. I used to live in Colombia, and I shot one there. And when I came back, I shot one during the LA riots. And I was like, okay, what happened? And then he wouldn't tell me. And that was a very strange dinner to have. He really liked the movie Gamer a lot. Neville Dean and Taylor, so, that's... People should watch Virtuosity. It's bad. It's a 1995 movie about VR and about Denzel Washington hunting a cybernetic serial killer.
I was like, oh, he's gonna be a VR serial killer. I know it.
It's better.
You said hunting. I was like, VR serial killer.
It's so much better than that. It's not just a VR serial killer. It's a serial killer. It's like an algorithmic serial killer who's been made of all the big data from all other serial killers. The cops made him. Surprise. Sorry for spoiling Virtuosity. Spoilers coming up for Virtuosity.
The rundown is not on Netflix. You're gonna have to find it.
Bullshit. Bullshit. All right, let's clap. Let's
don't check Amazon right now.
I promise that twist in Sid 6.7 spoiler hits pretty early on. So, all right, let's clap at 10 seconds.
Keith is upset.
Keith, look, it says it right here. Sid 6.7. Okay, Sid's short for sadistic, intelligent, dangerous. A VR amalgam of the most violent serial killers throughout history. But like it's a police project. That's the whole thing. One of the programmers in charge of it's the whole thing. It's in the first paragraph. You're fine. Go watch it. We should clap at 35 seconds.
Okay, but you said 10 and then talked.
I was catching up with that was 10.
Don't. Okay, I didn't clap because I had to tell you, don't ever joke clap. Don't do
Ever is a long time.
My 10th clap was not a joke clap. I thought we were gonna do it.
The point of the claps is visual. It's the point of that.
But now you'll see that there were 6 of them or whatever.
10 again?
Yeah, 10 seconds. Wait, 10 minutes? I'll clap now. Okay, 10 seconds. Oh, that was a good one on my side. All right. All right, everybody. We're going to hang up the call.
Hi, Keith.
Oh, is Keith here?
Hi, hey, I had something to say.
Hey, welcome, Keith. Welcome
I think joke claps are really funny, and when I edit podcasts, I really appreciate joke claps. I think it's really funny and good to do.
Wait, did you say Joe Claps? Who's that?
Joke claps.
Who's Joe Claps?
Joke claps.
Hey!
Gonorrhea guy.
Oh my God! You have to hang up this phone immediately. Hey, it's me, Joey Claps. Hey, yo. Go to. Thanks for the clap, everybody. Friends of the Table.cash, you already know what it is. Have a good night, everybody.
We were still streaming?
Yes. What?
That's how I knew to join. That's how I knew to join still, because I was watching.
Bye.